Hi everyone, and welcome to Leader Horse to Water. And I'm joined today by Gabriel Lencioni, and we are sitting here on Minehead Seafront, having done a little tour of Exmoor and seeing the ponies. And we thought we'd have a chat about cooperative care, mainly because we are midway through our IAABC foundation course right now. And so we're not trying to flog you anything. It's already running, so you can't join it. But we think lots of things come out of that, and we're always interested to see the way cooperative care is spoken about on social media. And so we're just going to have a little pull apart of some of the thoughts that we have about it. So first of all, I'm going to ask Gabriel, would he tell us what he thinks cooperative care is? And we should say that we both feel fairly similarly about these things. So Gabriel, what do you see as a way of telling people what cooperative care is?
Hello everyone, and thank you, Trudy, for inviting me again, this time in person here for us to be chatting a lot about these things that we love so much. And well, I guess in terms of cooperative care, when I try to think of a simple way to explain our view about it, is I always like to use the word communication, right? And I think that's mostly what we try to do, look at natural ways to easily communicate and express with our horses and also them with us. So I guess that's more or less what I try to think when we're designing a training plan for a cooperative care, for example.
Yeah, so that word of communication, it's often overused, the idea of communication, but I think it is a really clear way to see whether your horse is involved in something with you. And cooperation is a lovely word, and yes, it is. I think it's better than consent, maybe. If people talk about consent or assent, and whether horses can technically consent. And I'm less about that and more about them understanding what's going to happen next. So that in a way is communication, isn't it? We're telling them if X happens, Y will follow it. And so that leads to that extra layer of communication, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And that's a big part of cooperative care that we usually don't see designed like on social media and all of that it is just having predictability of what is happening. So
yeah,
I think that's a massive part. Before the training, there's a whole lot about predictability and all of that is already happening. And many times people don't treat that as part of the cooperative care session, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And so when we look at it, and as part of the course, we start right back at how do you start to associate a marker with the food, because that could be, or the scratching, or whatever you're going to use as your reinforcer. But it really is something that can grow out of that, isn't it? So our belief would be that if you're going to teach a horse to train with food, that you need to tell them to be reliable, so that you can tell them how they're going to get the food and what the conditions will be, and that you'll stick to that and you're not going to change around with that. And then gradually out of that, you get this ability to have that extra layer of language. So, maybe if we're thinking about how we deliver food into a bucket, say, or even hand feeding, that when the horse has finished chewing, he lifts his head out of the bucket, or he turns to you and just sort of half looks at you as if to say, well, where's the next lot going to come from then? And that's your first moment, maybe, of the horse, what we might call opting in. And that's sort of like a more natural, easy kind of, like, you can spot it, it's clear. But for people who are less good yet at recognizing behavior, we can also add in something that is a contrived way of saying, yes, I know what's happening. So people might use like a hoof pick or a grooming brush. In fact, you had a really interesting story, and it might be a good moment to sort of just mention that with your horse Nero and grooming, and whether he does opt in, or those layers of communication and what may be being tied up means to him. So let's give that little anecdote now, because that might give some people some ideas about where we're coming from.
Yeah, I think that after I started playing around with cooperative care, it also showed it to me how good opportunity that is to understand better our horses. And for some of these things, I think that we never know the answers, or many times like people won't even find out those details if they don't try it out. So I started testing out these things with my horse, and I noticed that, for example, many times while he was tied up, he wouldn't bother about being brushed, for example, with lots of different types of brushes or different procedures. But when I started doing these same things with him at the paddock, for example, with him at liberty, I noticed that with some brushes he would be fine, and with another one that was a more plastic material, I don't know if by the feeling of it or the sound or what was the main trigger, but he wasn't happy about it and he would choose to walk away. So I find that so interesting because it could lead us to so much more information that we usually don't have in everything that we're doing with horses. And he didn't show any other signs of like that he wasn't happy with that brush before. But I guess like that could be something adding up to some stressors for him throughout the day. So now we can avoid it or train it to do it in a better way.
Yeah, see, I think that's so interesting on many levels. But first level is, you know, when people say he's fine about X, he's fine about Y, he's fine because he's learned that if he's tied up, that not from you per se, but from other people that train horses, and then, you know, we come along and do our bit. But even from us, you know, the horse learns that I have less of an option when I'm tied up. So we're shutting down that communication by saying you can't opt out of here. Now, some people are going to say, why do I want my horse to opt out of being groomed? He has to be groomed. But if we're going to offer horses a better life and more choice, then surely we want to listen to when they say yes or no. So he's not saying no to every brush. It's not that his skin is so sensitive he can't bear any. He's saying, yeah, I can tolerate that. But if I have a choice, I wouldn't choose to be there for that brush. That brush is the one that I really don't want, which is really clear, isn't it? You know, like, no bite, I'm off. I don't want to be involved in this. So the other thing that leads me into is that when you do start giving horses choice, even over difficult things like hoof care or a brush that he doesn't like or clipping, sometimes and very often they then will sort of say, okay, if you're prepared to understand my limits, that I can't just go in and you do my whole body, or you can't do my legs with that, but you can do my chest with it or whatever, then they're much more likely to enter the conversation and listen to you. And probably the things you that need to do that are important for a horse's care, you can. You know, is that something you think that we see in our students? That kind of, yeah, no, he's okay about it bit to start with, for sure, is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's a lot to it also about understanding what is actually important for us to do with each horse or not. So for example, to me, this brush is not really necessary. So you can just like stop using it with him and use another one. But let's say it was important to use, I don't know for what reason, but specifically this brush. I could now build this behavior and work with him on that right from scratch and making him feel like much more confident and liking that interaction as well, instead of just coping with something that he doesn't like. So this way I'll actually be able to interpret better all the signals that he's giving and all of that. And also just saves a whole lot of time, even though people think that cooperative care takes longer. Now I can just like take him at liberty and clean his hooves or scratch him or brush him, and I don't need to tie him to anywhere, and that just gives me so much information.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is the idea that him being tied reduces his options so much that he won't have an opinion anymore. And that's really, because I know you're brilliant at observation. So you would have seen him. If he's swishing his tail at that brush, you would have seen him. But he's kind of like, well, no, I tolerate it, because bless him, he's such a good boy. He tries to please. And many horses do. And then, you know, you can end up chipping away at that relationship. And so by adding these layers of communication. So that was a bit of an anecdote to kind of set the scene as to where we are and how we feel about cooperative care or communication in care. Where I've sort of hinted at where we might start right back at the association of food with a market situation. But, you know, where do we get started by offering ins and outs, opt in and opt out? Easy is it for somebody who maybe has never done any of this stuff before? We talk about this a lot. We talk about how do we bring this to the masses? You know, we can't all be walking around with clickers. But are there ways that people could do this more easily, do you think?
I think so. And I think that like when we talk about cooperative care, there are lots of different stages as well. And depending on the context, the scenario, or which procedure has to be done, there will be different answers for that. People sometimes say, okay, I don't have enough time to train this type of behavior or to do like you're doing at Liberty, for example. So they think it's okay, like to do the opposite and don't care at all for the horse's response. And I don't think we should be doing that, because there's so many layers to that. We could start even in the most difficult environment, just adding a little bit of it, maybe like the entrance door, to do a little bit more in the next session, and then we go from there. So I think, the observational skills and already organizing, trying to make the environment better will already be like massive difference to the horse.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. But also, like talking about where we bring them in to do cooperative care. I mean, your big thing is setting up good environments that make the horse relax. So we know, I talk about that often on the podcast, bringing a friend along, making sure it's not a distracting environment, where it's not an environment where bad things have happened to them before. It's not maybe windy, there's no people keep passing, all of that stuff. I mean, I think people have got a lot better at setting up environments, but that's massive. Also, I think just if you have a place where you always train cooperative care, your first opt-in is that your horse walks calmly into that area. That having done some care before, they don't come in the next time and go, no, thank you, I can't deal with coming in this place. So that first, yes, I want to be there. So I always think about my little dog who's in the back, bless him. And he is so desperate to join me in cooperative care because he just loves the whole process. Even though there's some things that happen that are maybe harder for him to deal with, he still loves doing it. He enjoys the whole process. The day he doesn't back up to me to get picked up, to go onto the counter to get the care, then I know I'm not going to be picking him up. He's a little dog. I could easily pick him up. You wouldn't be picking up your Rottweiler. So you have to think of it in the same way. Can that dog opt in? So his opt-in is to allow me to lift him up. So with a horse, if they're at the door of that area saying, no, thank you, we can automatically assume that there's no opt-in right at the beginning, but the opposite is true as well. And I think people forget that. That's a really obvious first sign of, is my horse knowing what happens in this area? Are they good to come?
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing point, because that's also transferable for all the other activities that we're doing with them. So I don't take that only as information for a cooperative care thing when I'm doing, for example, daily. So when I go there to get my horse, for example, and I ask for his legs to clean his hooves or brush him, I can already notice by his responses and the intensity of the responses as well, if he might be feeling, for example, some subclinical pain or some kind of discomfort. And these answers may already change my decisions on what type of training we're doing on that day, or if we are riding, or for how long, or everything else that we are doing based on he may not be 100% on that day.
Yeah, I love that. And so it can start right at the moment that you arrive at the barn, at the yard, you walk down the field to see your horse, and they don't even look up from eating. They know you're there and they're like, no, thank you, not today, I'd rather not. And so that conversation, that communication can start right back there. Then so that can be opt-in one. Yes, I'm prepared to talk to you today. Or no, thank you. I know that whatever I do with you is fine, but today I don't want to do it. And people worry about that. I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about, working more on your opt-ins and your potential opt-outs. But, people are worried, aren't they, that their horse is going to opt out once and then forever. They're lost. But this is not the case, is it?
And you know what? I really can see people getting worried by hearing that and saying, oh, okay, so if your horse shows those signals, you're not doing anything with them on that day, and then you kind of lose the opportunity. And I'm like, okay, I understand that, but also if you notice these signs and then you push it and you keep doing it, and then you decide, let's say, to ride and do the normal work that you would do on that day, then your horse starts reacting, has a negative experience, and in the end, the horse is frustrated, you are frustrated, and you just had a negative experience for both. So was it worth it?
Yeah, no. And you're cross at yourself and you're mad because I think that's what always comes across in students, when they share video with us or they share their observations of a session, they will say, I should have stopped there. They know when they look back or they think about it, they know they pushed for one too many, because we're human and we do it.
Yeah.
And there's no judgment from us because we have done it too. We are.
Keep doing
We'll
it
keep doing
many
it.
times.
Yeah, we're trying not to, and we're trying to be aware of it. And I think just being aware of it. But those bad days, then the next time you want to train with your horse, it might not be that they're in any discomfort. It might be that the way they felt about that last session has put them off having any more sessions. Then you're dealing with something a whole different, sort of level, where the horse doesn't want to be involved with you because you don't have any ability to listen to them. But before we sort of leave that one, I'd like to sort of think about, what about the people, and this happens at vets, this happens at trainers' places, where the lovely, caring, positive reinforcement trainer takes their horse in and they say, I can't get him to do ABC, and the vet nurse or the handler or the loader or the trainer, whoever it is, picks up the rope and the horse does the thing. I can refer you back to the lovely episode I recorded with Polly Smith, because we talk about this a lot, about the idea that when you listen to your horse, it's like they get on the psychiatrist's couch and go, well, yes, I have this wrong, that wrong. And when those other people are doing it, again, they can't say yes or no. So it's a little bit like the lead rope, isn't it? It kind of covers stuff up when it's not you and you're not listening.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it's a phenomenon that happens, and that it's actually pretty bad for people that are in the beginning of their learning curve, because then it will give this idea of like, okay, this owner is just not too serious, so the horse doesn't listen to them. And that's not actually the case. If they are applying things correctly, they will be able to observe things, and after they start practicing, it will be actually the opposite. The horse will start learning better to them, and not only because they feel obligated to, but because they feel confident enough to do it. But there is a learning curve for that, even for the human and for the horse. And if your horse is always answering no when you give the opportunity, then there's something else wrong happening, like in the training or in their basic needs and all of that. So that's what you should be assessing.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, that if we see those things as a beginner, if we've just swapped from, maybe natural horsemanship or traditional horsemanship, and we're starting using positive reinforcement, the world around us is telling us that we are snowflakes and that we're not trying hard enough and we need to make the horse understand who's boss. But so we are a little bit conflicted ourselves, because we used to be part of that world, and we're not certain yet if we fully believe that, the power of listening to your horse. And I think that is, we're just about to do a nosedive off the camera. Let's hope we can save that one. There we go. So yeah, I think you're sort of worrying that your own judgment isn't good enough, and then you do take your horse to somewhere, and the farrier says that really you should be teaching your horse who's the boss, and then you're like, oh right, I'm back in that world and I need to be part of that world. I need to tell my horse, and I need to man up and stuff, and it doesn't really work at all, does it?
Yeah.
So how can we have that confidence in our own abilities when the world around us doesn't have confidence in those abilities? Why is this massive mismatch? It's a crazy question, because if you knew the answer, we would be solving the world's problems right now. But it is a problem, isn't it?
I think there is a massive problem to that as well. That, for example, many times positive trainers and all of that, they are seen as people who don't put limits in their animals. And I don't think that's the case when you know properly how to do the training. But many times people try to apply the techniques without proper knowledge of how to do it, and results in these types of problems of a horse that actually doesn't know how to express, is not confident, and that's why it leads to that. But if you apply these things correctly, they will actually communicate better and have more confidence and show these things, and not only be what other people will see as animals that don't have any, respect or things like that in that sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of like me saying you can't pick up a Rottweiler if they don't want you to. If you've got a big zoo animal, you can't do these things. But because horses are quite docile, we've learned that we can do quite a lot of stuff to them, especially if we inflict harm upon them. So if we've got a big bit, a chiffney, if we've got some ability to cut off the air supply via a tight noseband, we can do things. and they'll let us do things. And so that is a bit of a problem that we have to overcome. We hope that you'll think about it. If this is something that makes you sort of like balk at the moment and think, no, I can't do that, I don't want to give my horse choice. Yeah, it does actually change so much about the relationship. So we should think about the proper way that we opt in. So we talked about, coming into a space, and if the horse says yes, then they're kind of, in a way, that's that first major opt-in. We talked a little bit about developing a natural, yep, okay, I'm ready for the next bit, and then you attaching meaning to that bite. So they check in, and then you start doing the thing. You start moving your hand towards them. But what about somebody who's not confident that they can judge that moment where the horse is saying, yes, I'm ready to opt in? What about a more contrived opt-in?
Well, I know there are several options of different opt-ins to use, but I think that my suggestions in those cases where people have a big difficulty about noticing the opt-in behaviors would actually be being a very good observer for the opt-out behaviors.
Yeah.
And basically, even if you don't have a really clear starting point, like for the horse that he wants to interact with you, if he's around you and he's not using tail swish or moving away, you could use all of these naturally occurring behaviors as your like baseline to stop what you're doing. And if you follow very strictly your standards for those opt-out, then I'm sure the horse will feel much more confident and safe.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So listening to I can't deal with this, the little tiny. So people often think it's he'll move away. If he doesn't want to do the thing, he'll move away. But that's not necessarily the case, is it? So we can also develop a more contrived opt-out, as in, if you choose not to do the thing, I'll give you the same reinforcer in this bucket over here, or in the food scatter over here. So we're not saying you have to do the thing. It'd be nice if you do the thing. If you don't want to do the thing, if it's too hard, you can train the horse that they can say no by their body language. But then that can develop into a really clear look at a bucket, a look at a mat on the floor, look at a snuffle mat, however you want it to be. And that can just naturally develop by always feeding the no into, a bucket or a sprinkle on the floor, can't it?
Yeah. And I love this so much. And I think that this concept about feeding the no, even for positive reinforcement trainers and people that are used to this, can be a little bit mind-blowing in the beginning and be a bit conflicting information, because I can see how many people are worried that if you give free food after they make what we would consider a wrong repetition of behavior, we would be actually rewarding what we don't want, right? Yeah. So it's so interesting to see how we can make that work.
So people really do have a problem with the worrying that their horse will never want to get involved. And what your point is that if you keep having those errors, that, the horse will learn, I don't do anything, I just keep getting fed. So it's our opportunity, isn't it, to sit down and say, okay, I've had an error. I've had 2 errors, the same error. Then maybe I need to redesign my protocol, my process, and get better at it.
Yeah, I think that people go crazy when we talk about free fooding, because they're thinking that, okay, in a session of 10 repetitions, we are free fooding for 8 times. Like, no, that should not be happening. So like, if in 10 repetitions you had to give once free food, that's a good amount, I would say. But then you do your pause, you rethink what you're doing. So maybe next session you won't need to free feed at all, or maybe only once.
Yeah, this is really good. And I think that through that, you again build that language where you are starting to listen more carefully to your horse. But it is a hard thing that first time when you, and if you're using a marker, you might not mark it. I tend to say to people, if you're using a marker, don't mark that error. Just reach in your bag and give the horse food. And yes, you don't want to be doing a lot of that, because then the horse is going to start watching your hand rather than listening to the marker. But we're talking about odd times here. Maybe 1 error in 20 is acceptable, 1 in 10, okay. But more than that, we are starting to have problems there.
And you know what I love about that as well? I think we mentioned like the avoiding frustration to the horse, but I think it helps me a lot as well to avoid my frustration.
Yeah.
So when something goes wrong, I can just give free food, and while the horse is eating, I am able to think how I'm going to sort it out and what I'll do in the next repetition. So it helps me a lot to not get frustrated in that as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because it just gives you some breathing time. But you do have to make it become a very natural behavior. Didn't see the behavior I wanted. Oh, I'm just going straight in my bag and I'm going to feed it. And if anyone wants to look at the science around that, you can go and look at TV Joe Lang's work after Gold Diamond, and there's lots of stuff about degrees of freedom, and when we only give the horse the choice to opt in, that isn't actually a choice. We need to give them a choice to opt in on the same point, opt in, opt out, and maybe another option. So you might see dog trainers with 3 options, stand on this platform to do the thing, go to this bucket for the reinforcer, or if you prefer to go to that mat for that, or but all those choices, same reinforcer, different way of getting it, more layers of communication, less actual saying no in the long run. But people are going to have to take our word for that, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, like, it becomes basically an automatic behavior for us in emergency situations. I don't have to think. I just free food while I'm rethinking what I'm doing. So
yeah, and a nice big handful of it, especially if you're just feeding something like chaff or something that's fairly soft, and you just give them that massive big handful of it. It gives you more thinking time, and just know that if you're doing too many of them, not a good place to go. So we can contrive an opt-in. That might be them touching something. We prefer a natural opt-in, but that it's absolutely fine if you prefer to have an actual physical thing. But the one thing we tend to say is, if you are having a contrived opt-in, that it's contrived without too much reinforcement. Because if we put a lot of reinforcement into that opt-in, then the horse we might be superimposing it. It's like they'll do the thing because they want the food rather than knowing what's coming next. So that's just a little sort of like hint not to over reinforce that initial opt-in, really.
Yeah, and also not taking that long to start putting the behavior itself into that chain, right? Because basically sometimes we see people focusing so much on that opt-in that the horse doesn't understand that it's about something else and not only doing this opt-in behavior.
Exactly. So if X happens, Y will follow. It's putting the Y in quite quickly afterwards. So if you touch the hoof pick, or if you look at me in a certain way, I will move my hand, and then I will move my hand towards your face, and then I will shape that to touch your face, touch your ear, touch your eye, whatever we're going to do. So the opt-ins, we can have multi-layers. The opt-outs, we can offer choice. We can watch for those things that the horse might do with their body: tail swishing, moving their feet, moving away, leaning away. There's so many that we cover those in the course. But the other thing that I think is a big thing that comes up with people is that, well, if I teach my horse to do this, what if when he's at the vet's and the vet doesn't take any notice, he doesn't know how to cooperative? Or what about my farrier who doesn't have it? And again, I think a really lovely anecdote, since you've been here in the UK for a while, was that lovely video you sent to me of your dad. And we should say right up that your father is not a horse trainer. It's not something that he's used to doing, is it?
No, at all. And well, my father overall has always loved horses and liked to be around horses, but he didn't have his own horse and didn't have any background in training. And quite the opposite, actually, because he, just grew up and used to ride horses, learning with traditional people, so like traditional handling and all of that as well. And as Trudy mentioned, I've been here for 6 months now in the UK, and he has been helping me with some things with my horse back in Brazil. And one of them, for example, was making sure he is well, so taking a look at him, and also cleaning his hooves and seeing how they are. And well, we usually hear people saying those things like, well, if you only train your horse with cooperative care, then no one else will be able to do the things that are needed. And I was super happy about it because my father just sent me videos of him cleaning the hooves of my horse, for example, with him free at liberty at the paddock, and the horse was happy about it, and they were going really well, even without any previous training. So I think that there's a big important aspect to it, that this whole thing of confidence that we were saying, even if the training is not the same as he was taught with me, the horse is still able to do the things that he's being asked to, and he's still confident to do it because he knows what's going on, basically, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think once they learn to trust that a human will listen, even if your dad might not be able to hear quite as keenly as you are in terms of, you know, observing behavior and language from the horse, he's trusting now. He knows that he can use his ability to say no, to opt out. You know, he can take his hoof back, and your dad would listen to that. So I think it was such a lovely video to watch. Somebody clearly not versed in cooperative care using food in a very general way, which was so lovely. And I think it does, as you say, it negates those things that people are always saying about cooperative care, positive reinforcement principles in general, that, oh, you can't ever send your horse anywhere else ever again because nobody knows how to do it. Good training results in habits, and habits last, and just the odd top up with a bit of food is going to really help that habit sustain itself over a long period. So I think we are it's for some reason it's an excuse that people come up with for not doing it, and I think it's quite a shame.
Yeah, for sure. And even like in terms of safety and accidents and all of that, it could feel strange even for like people that are used to handle horses. They are not happy many times to handle, let's say, like the hind limbs without the horse being tied or someone else holding that horse. And it's so interesting how, in fact, it's quite the opposite. Like, I was pretty confident in teaching from a distance my father how to clean his hooves, like from his hind hooves, even without having that previous experience, with him at liberty and a pasture. And I would bet like a lot of money that nothing bad would happen, you know, because he knows he can go out from that situation if it just lets go, you know. So yeah, respecting the no's and the opportunity to reward the yeses.
Yeah, it's massive, isn't it? So it's a game changer, that the patterns that you bring in through positive reinforcement in general, but through cooperative care communication, really adds up. So I'd like to sort of finish, so we don't make this one too long, on the idea that, you know, I've jokingly come up with HIT as our acronym for horse initiated training, and I want to make that stick because I think it is so important that it's not just about cooperative care. We can use this with handling, and we always encourage our students, if they're going to give the horse a cue, to wait for the horse to be ready. And that ready is technically an opt-in, isn't it? You know, it's like, hey, I'm ready for the next thing to happen, and we can take that to riding. We can take it throughout. That communication is everything that you know we need, isn't it, to do better by our horses.
Yeah, I think that's key, and it's something that for a long time we kind of taught horses not to express this, because we never asked them if he wants to do it or not. You know, we're actually taught quite the opposite, right from early on, in like teaching children.
Don't let him have an opinion. You must not let him have an opinion.
You are the boss. You have to show him that. And it's much better, and I feel much better being able to be in this kind of relationship with my horse. And it actually results in like more yeses than the traditional way as well, if you do it correctly. Yeah.
And it's funny, you know, that word relationship, which is what everybody's looking for fundamentally. We say we're not, but I keep hearing it. It's like, I want a relationship with my horse. We wouldn't have a relationship with another human being that was one-sided. We definitely shouldn't. If anyone's thinking of it, do not. But we wouldn't. And why do we think it's okay with an animal? We think it's not okay even with a dog now. We're much more aware of how that's not a good thing. But why is it? Is it because they're big and they're strong and they can run off and hurt us? I think it is, and I think we have to change that. And I talk about this a lot, and I end a lot of podcasts saying we have to do better. We have an opportunity now, possibly not in my lifetime, but we do have an opportunity to start to make things truly better for horses. And this is a good way to, whether it's cooperative care, a communication system, HIT, or whatever it is, very tongue-in-cheek, that one. We need to start giving horses better voices, don't we?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that on that topic, like many times people bring up, for example, emergency situations to say, okay, but I can't do that. I don't have the time. And horses you will have to do it anyway. So I don't have enough time in my routine or emergency situations in a veterinary hospital, for example, to do that. And actually, that is also not true, because I believe that after you prepare the horse for this type of procedures, when you do have an emergency that you have to do that procedure anyway, just by observing these tiny things, the horse will be able to cope better, and he will be able to go through painful interactions or discomfortable procedure and all, because he has developed that resiliency, and he knows to trust you or the people that are doing the procedure. So that's super useful. And also another lie that we hear quite often is that it takes too long. And I definitely can see that as something true, especially for procedures that we have to do repeatedly. We usually see people fighting the horses to do it and spending a lot of time, but really, if we do it that way, we would spend like a couple minutes by the end of this.
I think they're massive myths, and we unpack all of these in the course. Every course is different. When people come along, we get a different mix of people from different backgrounds. Some people are dog people, some people are horse people, and it's really nice to unpack some of these myths. And you can see Gabriel's training with his horse Nero, and you can see my training, and it just sort of starts to make you rethink what is possible, even in an emergency. And that's your big speciality. That's your part of the course. And I love that. The more things that we can do to make it easy for horses to cope with it. So I guess we just need to say, come and join us on a course soon. Can't say when, because we don't actually have another one booked on the calendar. But by the time you listen to this, maybe we will have, or just look out for it. We both share it on social media when we're running it again, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. And it will be great to have you there. And also, I think it's nice to mention that we always organize the course in a way where you can actually do things with your own horse and practice it. And it's amazing to see. I think it's our favorite part, I can say for me, but to see this evolution of from the weeks of the course, and we can see how well humans and horses start communicating better in that sense. So I always love seeing that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love seeing people's training, and not everyone's in the same place. Some people are starting from scratch, and other people already have started using these techniques. It doesn't matter. It's come as you are, and we'll find you where you are and take you forwards. And that's what's important. That's what we get excited about, the little changes that can make such a difference for your horses. So join us soon somewhere, or interact with us on social media and ask questions, and we'll always do our best to answer you. So we'll see you again very soon. Thank you, Gabriel, and let's hope we can do this very soon again.
Thank you so much, Trudy. As always, it's lovely to be here, and it will be great to meet you all in the course as well.
Bye.